Hi everyone, my name is Elvira. I'm an author and today I'm diving into the fascinating and often misunderstood world of Russian women. You've heard the reputation, right? Russian women as femme fatale, beautiful, alluring but dangerous. This image, of course, mostly comes from Hollywood movies where Russian women are played by, well, not Russians. Think of Barbara Bach, Jacqueline Bisset, or Miriam Dabo. Gorgeous, yes, but as Russian as California sunshine. If you know a bit of Russian history, you might also have a certain image of Russian women based on portraits of tsarinas. But here's the twist. For about 200 years, Russian tsarinas were actually German. And the artists who painted them were either foreign or heavily influenced by European traditions. So, what are Russian women really like? That's a question as vast as Russia itself. With over 100 nationalities living in the country, there is no single answer. But today, I'll share insights into the lives of women in the northwest of Russia. It's where I'm from, and it's a world I know deeply. By Western beauty standards, Slavic women are often considered very attractive. Why? It's all in the features. Round faces, large eyes, small mouths, and delicate noses. Of course, there are exceptions, especially since Russia is such a melting pot of ethnicities, but these traits are quite common. Living in California, I can spot a fellow Slav in the crowd instantly, just by their facial features. It's like having a built-in radar. No need to hear them speak, you just know they are one of ours. These features, round faces and large eyes, are universally associated with babies, which our brains instinctively find cute. This works beautifully for women, but not so much for men. Western beauty standards for men emphasize strong jawlines and defined features, which Slavic men don't always have. For an interesting contrast, head to Argentina. There, many men look like Roman gods with sharp jawlines and flawless profiles. Argentine women often share these features too. It's stunning, but a completely different aesthetic from what you'd find among Slavs. Traditionally in Russia, being thin wasn't a good thing. The words for thin and bad even share the same root, hudo. Beauty was associated with being robust, stately, and rosy-cheeked, someone with enough to grab onto, as the saying goes. Take a look at portraits of Russian noble women from the past. You'll notice very few thin women among them. A double chin was considered attractive. Think about how Tolstoy described Anna Karenina or Katerina from Resurrection. They were full-figured and even worried about losing weight. Natasha Rostova from War and Peace also gains weight when she finds happiness, which confused us school kids in the 1980s, when being thin was their ultimate goal. Historically, women were valued less than men, and there were three main reasons for this. Childbirth without modern medicine or anesthesia was extremely dangerous. Many women didn't survive their first delivery. A girl was raised with the grim understanding that her greatest test in life might also be her last. Women who survived childbirth and had healthy children gained more value in society, but their bodies paid the price. Multiple pregnancies led to tooth loss, serious health issues, and often early deaths, many related to complications from childbirth. In Russia's harsh climate, survival required grueling physical labor. Plowing a field, for example, demanded significant strength to push a plow. Heating a home meant chopping and hauling wood, as coal and peat weren't available in central Russia. Men's physical strength made them more valuable as workers, and a male serf was worth 3 times as much as a female serf. A widow without grown sons to help her was often forced to beg for living unless she had a skill like weaving, sewing, or distilling homemade liquor. Even among the nobility, daughters were valued less than sons. Most noble families were poor and relied on military or government service for survival. Careers closed off to women. Things began to change when factories sprang up in cities. Suddenly, women could earn their own wages, but tradition still lingered, and women were paid significantly less than men. This disparity persisted well into the 20th century, even under the Soviet Union, which claimed to value equality. In old Russia, your social class determined your entire life. If you were born into the lower classes, the chances of climbing the social ladder were slim to none. Yet occasionally miracles happened. Wealthy aristocrats who owned vast estates and thousands of serfs sometimes trained the most talented among them to perform in their private theaters. These performers weren't just entertainers. They were living status symbols. Lavishly dressed and showcased before guests, they were as much a display of wealth as the family silver. One such serf actress was Praskovya Zhemchukova. Her stage name, meaning pearl, was bestowed by her master, Count Nikolai Sheremetyev. Praskovya became the star of Sheremetyev's private theater, earning acclaim even from Tsarina Catherine the Great. Praskovya's story was a real-life Cinderella tale. Sheremetyev eventually married her, despite the vast differences in their social standing. But their happiness was fleeting. Praskovya died during childbirth, at just 34. Far more often, these stories didn't end in fairy tale weddings. Wealthy men would seduce and abandon beautiful young women, a practice called pogubit devitsu, to ruin a maiden. For these women, life after such ruin was grim. Many ended up in prostitution or took their own lives. Not all stories were about rising to greatness. Some women voluntarily gave up their wealth and status for love. In 1825, a group of noblemen, inspired by the revolutions in America and France, attempted a coup to abolish serfdom in Russia. The uprising failed, and the leaders were exiled to Siberia. Here's the remarkable part. 11 noble women, married to these revolutionaries, chose to join their husbands in Siberia. They gave up their privileges, wealth, and freedom, living under harsh conditions to be with the men they loved. Their sacrifice is immortalized in poems, books, films, and even a monument in Irkutsk. Being ambitious and intelligent was often a curse for women in 18th and 19th century Russia. Opportunities for self-fulfillment were scarce, particularly in provincial towns. Women of the lower classes barely scraped by, while those of noble or merchant families were often limited to roles in religion or charity. However, for women in the upper aristocracy, the game changed, especially under the reign of female rulers like Catherine the Great. Take Princess Dashkova, a close confidant of Catherine, who became the first non-royal woman to hold a high government position as the director of the Imperial Academy of Science in St. Petersburg. Such an achievement would have been unimaginable under the reign of male monarchs. But ambition in a stifling system could also breed darkness. Consider Saltychikha, an 18th century Moscow landowner who inherited great wealth and absolute control after her husband's death. With unchecked power over her serfs, she turned into a tyrant. She beat her servants with logs, scolded them with boiling water, and even left them tied naked to poles in the winter cold. She was convicted of at least 38 murders, and ironically, her house stood near what later became the KGB headquarters. Talk about cursed real estate. Russian women enjoyed more legal freedom than many of their European counterparts. They could inherit and manage property, and widows or unmarried women occasionally stepped into the role of business owners. One remarkable example is Vera Fersanova, a trailblazing entrepreneur who owned the luxurious Sanduny buffs, restaurants, and elite apartment buildings, many of which remain iconic landmarks in Moscow today. She managed her empire single-handedly, becoming one of the most successful businesswomen and philanthropists of her era. However, stories like hers were exceptions, not the rule. Most women lacked access to education or vocational training. Universities did not admit women until 1896, and even then their career paths were largely limited to teaching or nursing. Breaking into the arts or sciences was nearly impossible for women. But some managed to break the rules. Take Sofia Kovalevskaya, the first female math professor in the world. She had to stage a sham marriage just to study abroad because her father refused to let her pursue an education. In everyday life, women were often the unsung artists, drawing, writing, or playing instruments, but serious art and literature were off limits. Writing a novel like Tolstoy or Turgenev? Who do you think you are? One bizarre story from the early 20th century involved a mysterious poetess, Cherubina de Gabriac. Literary circles were abuzz with admiration for her verses, believing that the author was half Russian, half Spanish nobility. But when it was revealed that Cherubina was actually a humble school teacher named Elizaveta Dmitrieva, all interest vanished. This allure was gone the moment her identity was exposed. In my next video, we'll explore the fascinating world of Soviet women, their triumphs, tragedies, and breakthroughs. Now, discover the untold story of the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 in Russian Treasures, my historical novel coming in early 2025. If you love rich, intricate stories that reveal the human side of monumental events, you won't want to miss this. Sign up for my waiting list now and be the first to embark on this extraordinary journey into Russia's most pivotal moment. The link is in the description.